Hi, Pisces Sun, Moon, and Risings. Welcome to your June 2022 horoscope. My name is Cailin, and today I'm going to be covering the major transits for the month ahead using tropical astrology and the whole sign system. I strongly recommend that you watch your horoscope for your ascendant sign first and foremost, because it will be the most accurate for you overall. Having said that, if you've got time to watch your sun and moon sign horoscopes as well, I would recommend that you do so because watching all three will give you a very well rounded and blended picture of what you can expect for the month ahead. So, the sun sign horoscope will tell you more about your career and your goals in life, whereas the moon sign horoscope will pertain more to your family life, your relationships, your property and living circumstances, as well as your emotional health and well-being. And now let's get into your reading. On the 3rd of June, Mercury is going to station direct in the sign of Taurus at 26 degrees in your third house. So Mercury will have been retrograde in not only Taurus in your third house, but also Gemini in your fourth house as well. Now that Mercury will be direct, you may have ironed out some miscommunications which may have occurred with certain friendships, your siblings, relatives, and maybe co-workers as well. There could have been some significant changes or deadlines significant changes to your projects, but also changes to your deadlines as well. And meetings may have been pushed back, or you may have just shown up for meetings on the wrong day or had people completely cancel on you. Now, you may have experienced some technological breakdowns or some issues with your vehicles. The good news is once Mercury is direct, this is when things can start to calm down and go a lot more smoothly. There is always a post-shadow period for 2 weeks. So after the 17th or the 18th of June, things will well and truly be back to normal. Now, on a different level, with Mercury having been retrograde in Gemini in your fourth house, this can see you maybe having reevaluated your current living circumstances. So maybe you've made some decisions about the relocation process, basically moving somewhere else, doing some renovations to your property. If you have been looking at relocating, you may have changed your mind about the areas where you want to live or what sort of property you are looking for. On a different note, if you have tenants, they may have moved out during this period of time or given you notice that they are going to be doing so shortly. Now, on the 4th or the 5th of June, depending where you live in the world, Saturn is going to station retrograde in the sign of Aquarius at 25 degrees in your 12th house. Every year, Saturn spends 5 months being retrograde, so it's not necessarily a big deal, but I do like to mention when planets station direct and retrograde. So, with Saturn retrograde in your 12th house, you may be actually working out some of your problems or concerns during your sleep. So you could be solving issues while you're sleeping or while you're meditating. And for some of you, you may be making repeated efforts to get into some sort of routine with your sleep, or perhaps you are looking at getting into meditation or yoga. You could be working really hard at these things. And for some of you, you may be deconstructing your understanding of spirituality. So maybe you had a preconditioned idea of, how it works, what to expect, and now you could be sort of unraveling what your preconceived ideas were. And on a more physical level, for those of you who are, filmographers, photographers, or who work in some sort of confined space, such as a laboratory or an art studio, you could be putting in some extra long hours when it comes to finishing off a project or editing some sort of work that you've been doing. And on a different level, this could just be a time where there's less time for rest and relaxation due to you having to work really hard on some sort of project behind the scenes. Now, on the 11th or the 12th of June, depending where you live in the world, we're going to see a conjunction occur between Venus and Uranus at 16 degrees in Taurus in your third house. This conjunction occurs about once a year, and the nature of Uranus is that it has a very chaotic energy. It can represent things which are unexpected happening or unforeseeable, or it can also represent things that are premature, so happening earlier than expected. So, because this is occurring in your third house, this can see you out of the blue, starting up some sort of new project with a friend, with a sibling, with a relative, maybe like a cousin, an aunt, or an uncle. You could actually make a new friend, and the two of you could hit it off straight away. The third house represents small groups, so you may even, have a new friendship group forming. And this could be really unexpected. The circumstances in which you meet could be really random, and it could be like a chance encounter. Now, the third house is also connected to clients, co-workers, and collaborations of all kinds. So you could be striking up some sort of new partnership. You could form a new business connection with someone. You could be working on a project together, starting a new collaboration. And because this conjunction will be opposite the moon in Scorpio in your ninth house, perhaps this person is of a different cultural background to you. They could live in a different country to you. And on a different note, this new project or collaboration that you're working on could be something which is circulated to an international market, or perhaps that is your target audience. Now, the third house represents projects and communications pieces, and the planet Uranus represents inventions and new innovations. So, you could have a fresh new idea for a new project that you are starting, or a new invention that you want to create. You may be developing a prototype for something new. And the way that Venus Uranus conjunctions can play out is that you can receive a sudden download of information for something creative that you want to do. So, with the third house ruling over communications, if there is a writing piece that you have created, or perhaps you've made a video, or you've put together some sort of report or essay, this could go viral, and this could actually lead to new connections and new opportunities. The third house also represents education in terms of short courses and receiving diplomas and qualifications and certifications. So you may unexpectedly commence something. So maybe you had no intention of doing a course, but then something pops up and you're like, hey, this would be an awesome idea. Or with Uranus representing separation and divorce, for those of you who are already involved in a short-term education course, this could see you unceremoniously quitting that course. And so this conjunction can have a somewhat paradoxical effect. On one hand, the nature of conjunctions represents that something new can be taking off, but then the energy of Uranus can indicate that there is a sudden departure from this thing, or a separation of sorts. So, on one hand, you may be making new friends, signing on new clients, forming new collaborations, and starting new projects. But on the other hand, you could, worst case scenario, have a falling out with a friend, or maybe even a sibling. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to stop talking to them altogether. It could just be that, there's a sudden outburst, which is quite surprising, and now you need time to cool off in that relationship. Lastly, with this conjunction, Venus rules over your eighth house, which represents mutual resources. And the third house, where the conjunction is taking place, represents contracts. So there could be some unexpected changes which occur with respect to your mutual resources. So this can include, but is not limited to, child support, alimony money, inheritances, taxes. So, any kind of combined bank account that you have with another person or resources that you share with another person. Essentially, the arrangement could be subject to some sort of surprising change. And, it could be that you are the one who is initiating this change, and perhaps this is taking the other party by surprise. Now, on the 15th/16th of June, depending where you live in the world, we're going to see a conjunction taking place between Mars and Chiron in Aries at 15 degrees in your second house. This conjunction takes place about once every 2 years. So, in order to understand how this can impact you, let's first have a look at what Mars and Chiron represent. Mars is the planet of willpower, drive, ambition. It represents how we take action. It can also represent arguments and aggression and, worst case, violence and having a temper. Now, Chiron represents our core spiritual wound, or this could be like an emotional wound. And essentially, Chiron was initially classed as an asteroid when it was first discovered, but then later it was reclassified as what's known as a centaur. Now, I'm not talking about the wild beast, half horse, half man centaur. This is more of like a planetoid. Anyway, you can look that up if you're interested. Now, what Chiron represents in astrology is based on the Greek mythology figure Chiron, who was a real centaur, not that centaurs are real, but essentially Chiron was a very gifted healer, and he was able to heal everyone who came to see him. So basically, he was very well versed in healing with herbs, medicine. He was also a teacher, and one day he was fatally wounded by an arrow, and the only person that he couldn't heal was himself. And as given that he was not he was half mortal and half immortal, so he couldn't actually die. So he was living out his days in pain and suffering. And from this story, we can see how Chiron plays out when we experience it astrologically. So Mars and Chiron together in your second house represents there being some sort of core wound that needs to be addressed with respect to your finances and your resources and your material possessions. The second house also represents our values. So this can be anything that we value: your time, your resources, how much we value ourselves, and so on and so forth. Because this conjunction is occurring at 15 degrees, which is the Gemini degree, this represents that there may be a conversation which is had around these topics or regarding these topics. We may consume information pertaining to these topics. And essentially, this can see us needing to be very cognizant of how this is affecting our mentality. So, for some of you Pisceans, you may be addressing your spending habits. Maybe you are spending more money than you have. With Mars ruling over your ninth house, maybe you're finding yourself unable to envision a future where you actually have everything that you need. You may be very acutely aware of the fact that you are misjudging in some way how much you actually need for the future. Maybe it's that you're saving to the point of denying yourself the things that you actually need or that you really want or that could improve your life somehow. Essentially, this is a very big focus on your finances. How much do you have? How much do you need? How much are you spending? How much do you need to save? How much do you need to spend? And so on and so forth. Because the second house represents valuables and possessions, this can see some of you Pisceans basically addressing whether or not you've been buying things to fill some kind of void, or perhaps you've been refraining from spending money on certain valuables and possessions because you are overly conscious of your resources and the future, and maybe you're worried about not having enough for the future. Now, because the 15th degree is the Gemini degree, which represents communications, this can see you being aware of your scarcity mindset or a lack mindset, or repeating affirmations of poverty. So, if you say any of the following things out loud, if you think them, if you tell yourself these things, this is where Mars in Chiron can actually be hurting you inadvertently. Maybe you have said things to yourself or thought things to yourself like, I'll always be poor. I'll never have enough money. I don't deserve to have nice things. I'll never have the things that I want. I'll never earn the kind of money that I want. All of these things are incredibly harmful to your earning capacity. These things are harmful to your self esteem, how much you value yourself. And perhaps this conjunction between Mars and Chiron is going to make you really cognizant of when you are saying these things and when you do think these things. And maybe you'll be more aware of your spending habits and the things that you may or may not be denying yourself. Lastly, with this conjunction, Chiron can not only represent the ways in which we're hurting ourselves or where we experience pain and suffering, it can also represent the ways in which we are subconsciously or consciously hurting other people. Maybe your values when it comes to finances and possessions are hurting other people. This could be a lack of generosity. This could be you um, basically making decisions about what money is spent on that either harms your family or harms your significant other. So, this will certainly be an area that many of you Pisces will want to address. But now let's move on to a more lighthearted topic. On the 22nd/23rd of June, depending where you live in the world, Venus is going to enter the sign of Gemini, which means it will be transiting your fourth house, and it will be there till around the 17th or the 18th of July. Wherever Venus goes, whichever house it transits, it brings some sort of blessing there, or things can go more smoothly. We can have more opportunities and derive more enjoyment from whichever house Venus is transiting. So, with Venus in your fourth house, this can see you investing in things for your home. Maybe this is new art, decor, furniture. You could be feeling extremely creatively inspired while you are in your home. You could actually receive money to put towards your home. And I'm saying that because Venus rules over your eighth house, which represents mutual resources. For some of you, you could actually be buying a new home. And I'm saying this because Venus rules over your third house, which represents contracts. And essentially, with Venus ruling over your eighth house, this can represent you combining resources with another person to purchase a home. Now, on a different level, the fourth house is connected to your family. So you could be spending more time with family. You could be having friends and family over to your home. Maybe you're just entertaining in your home more or feeling more sociable in your home environment. And lastly, the fourth house is connected to our emotional state. So this can see you feeling more at peace. Maybe you're feeling more emotionally content and in balance. Maybe you're just feeling happier and more joyful. Now, on the 28th of June, Neptune is going to station retrograde at 25 degrees in Pisces in your first house. Like Saturn, Neptune spends about 5 months every year being retrograde. So it will be retrograde until the 4th of December in 2022. Neptune is one of your ruling planets. The other planet would be Jupiter. And essentially, to understand how this transit is going to impact you, let's first have a look at what Neptune represents. So Neptune is a planet which rules over donations, charity. It's where we can give selflessly and be very altruistic. But on the other side of the coin, this is where we can experience exploitation or exploit others. This represents the victim savior complex, and it also represents escapism, especially escapism through substances. So, with Neptune being retrograde here, it can sort of invert this energy. And Neptune is also connected to confusion, fogginess, and not really understanding things for what they really are. So, this can see you feeling less confused and actually having more clarity. Now, the degrees at which Neptune will be retrograde will be 25 degrees, going back to 22 degrees. And because Neptune takes such a long time to do a full orbit through all 12 signs, I like to give it a 1 degree orb in terms of when we're really going to feel this transit. So the Pisceans who will feel the most impacted by this will be Pisces risings, suns, and moons between about 21 degrees and 26 degrees. So maybe you're gaining more clarity. Maybe you're understanding behavior which has been potentially self-sabotaging or harmful in some way, shape, or form. Maybe you are becoming aware of where you have been giving too much to other people. And I would say this would be more like giving your time, so like your emotional resources. In some instances, it could be that you are giving a lot of money away, and this could actually be to your detriment or more than you can afford to give. You may be aware of people taking advantage of your good intentions and your generous nature. You may become aware of where you have been forgiving to the point where it's bordering on permissiveness. And what I mean by that is, being so altruistic and selfless that people just take and take and take. So the positive here is that you can become aware of energy draining activities, behaviors, and relationships. And I'm sure some of you Pisces will start having some sort of meditation process or cleansing process just to really purify your energy, especially if you've been around people who are extremely draining of your energetic energy and resources, really. So, another way that this can play out is that you may be working to give up your dependence on alcohol, certain drugs, or recreational substances. Maybe this is to do with self medicating. And even if it's not going cold turkey, maybe it's a reduction in how much you are, consuming certain substances. Now, lastly, this can see you becoming aware of relationships which have either turned codependent or which have the potential to become codependent. So you could sort of be like nipping it in the bud or reversing relationships that have already gotten to that point. So, lastly, for the month, and I'm going to end on a huge high here. Venus in Gemini in your fourth house will be making a sextile to Jupiter in Aries in your second house. So Jupiter is your other ruling planet, and whatever Jupiter is doing, whether it's making aspects or changing signs, you'll want to pay attention to this because this is really representative of the changes that you are going to experience in your life, because Jupiter effectively represents you. At least it does for you Pisces risings. If you have a different rising sign, you'll want to check out what the planetary ruler is for that sign. Nonetheless, the fourth house represents your home life, property, living circumstances, family, and emotional state of well being. Whereas the second house represents your finances, resources, valuables, possessions, and anything that you value. Now, the fact that this is a sextile aspect represents that there is some sort of opportunity which is going to make itself known to you. Now, I've given this example in a few of my other horoscope videos for June, but you can think of sextiles as someone giving you money and they're like, hey, go spend this money on yourself, but they don't hand it to you. They put it on the table and you have to actively pick it up and pocket it. Okay. So another way I could explain this would be sextiles are like having a gift voucher that you receive from another person, but you need to go and take the card and spend it on whatever it is that the card is for. So you do have to explicitly engage with the opportunity in order to capitalize on it. So, on one hand, you could actually experience an increase in your finances or in your resources, and this could somehow be benefiting you with regard to your family. Maybe you need to support them. Maybe you want to just do something nice for them. Maybe you want to um, have some sort of social event at your place and now you've come into a bit of money or you have the resources to host such an event on a different level, you may receive a piece of advice from a family member or from your flatmate where it's like a little pointer or a tip on how to make more money through your own efforts, how to generate more income, how to ask your boss for a raise. And the reason why I'm mentioning these things is because not only does Jupiter rule over your first house, it also rules over your 10th house as well. So this represents your career and it represents your boss. So maybe you're looking at striking up a conversation with asking your boss for more money. Now, you could receive a valuable or a material possession, and this could be as a gift, or they could be giving you money and saying, hey, go and buy something for the house or whatever it is that you need. And essentially, some of you could actually be buying in a home or investing in things for your home. So, lastly, with this transit, you could have a conversation with a family member or a flatmate, which leads to you having an increased sense of self worth and self value. Maybe this is a very enlightening conversation, which helps you to understand your inherent value or to realize the ways in which you can basically create more abundance in your life. And like I said earlier, potentially increase your income and your resources. And so, Pisces, that's all I have for you for June 2022. If you enjoyed this horoscope, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more content on this channel, please hit the subscribe button. And if you'd like to book a private one-on-one reading with me, you can do so via the link in the description box below. Enjoy your month ahead, Pisces, and I will see you in July.